So in this video, I do want to provide a little bit more of a context for the way that I use the term science writing, and also provide you some kind of insight or some explanation or an overview into how other people might use the term science writing and how it is different from the term scientific writing in many instances. So we're going to look at science versus scientific writing as it's often the distinction that's often used in a lot of research on this topic or in a lot of talks with this topic. But in general, I want to say that science writing seems to be the umbrella term that describes all writing that has to do with science in the broadest sense, right? But there is a distinction that scientific writing is maybe a subform of it, or you can even differentiate between scientific and science writing. So having said that, in this class, when I talk about science writing, I really mean all writing. We are focusing in this class on principles that can apply for both what some people distinguish as science or scientific writing. In MHS 607, we'll focus particularly on scientific writing, which is often used to describe predominantly academic writing around science, right? So it's really this part right here. The writing published in academic journals for mainly academic audiences often gets described as scientific writing. That's a very, very common distinction. And the writing published for more general audience or for more general audiences, I should say, right? It's better to always use a plural there, is often referred to as science writing, such as books, newspapers, blogs, and so on. There are a lot of blurry lines in between there, so there is no one clear demarcation. And as I said, science writing tends to also include scientific writing. But some folks differentiate very clearly between scientific and science writing. So in this course, we're focusing on science writing as an overall umbrella term for all writing about science. Whereas in 607, the next course you'll be taking with me, we really are focusing on mostly academic writing, so I'll use the term scientific writing a lot more. Okay, so hopefully that creates clears some of the confusion. Again, when you're reading other people's work, a lot of people use science writing and mean scientific writing, and they're really writing about texts that are for academic audiences, so you sometimes have to do a little bit of detective work to figure out what people mean. So let's talk about writing. Let's look at some examples for writing for academic audience, what that looks like. And I have two examples for each, academic audiences versus more general audiences. So here is a typical introduction. This comes from a text, Global Ecology and Biogeography, Landscape Modification, Habitat Fragmentation, a Synthesis. And this is an article that I have a link to in the recommended or supplemental material in the Blackboard site as well in the module for this week. And you'll see some of the hallmarks of, scientific writing, as people like to call it. Right, I'm going to put this up here. Sorry about my handwriting, it's not the greatest, but you get the picture. Lots of citations, right? We don't see as many citations or any with parentheses, or if you use AMA with a number, with the either the footnote or you have a number in a square bracket. Those are the two most common, I think, citation styles used in science writing in general, or scientific writing, I should say. APA, which is this format right here with the in-text citation, parentheses, or numbered AMA model. But lots of citations. For example, I've been reading this great book just these past few days called, God, I don't have it in front of me. It's in the living room. I'm sitting in my study right here. It's called Superior. Something about race science. It's a wonderful book. Actually, it's one of the recommended books for 607 for the book review, and I think it's just amazingly written. And the author, Saini is her last name, I'm blanking on her first name, does a wonderful job in providing an overview of the role that race has played in science and science exploration. And she cites and references a lot of text, but there are no in-text citations the way we see it in scientific writing that's more for academic audiences. She does have a list of a bibliography at the end, but that's a typical hallmark or typical characteristic of scientific writing. Usually lots of longer sentences, lots of terms that are very specific, landscape modification, habitat fragmentation, taxonomic groups, fragmentation, again, paradigms. Those are terms that we find more frequently in scientific writing or writing for academic audiences. So for general audiences, here's another example. This is a classic popular science text by Lewis Thomas, Lives of a Cell. And I've taken this example from this great website on the bottom here, examples of good science writing. And good is it's the value judgment by the Intel Tech program. But there are some great references or some great examples here of writing that's really, that's been cited by a lot of people as effective science writing. And science writing is meant here as particularly for public audiences. So Lewis Thomas is a very famous scientist, but he's also written books for not lay people or people who are not maybe deeply trenched in biology. And so you can see a lot of active language. It's about they will invade, turn out on close examination. So you see some strong verbs here and some fairly simplistic verbs rather than elucidate or examine or something like that. Our arsenals, we live, a lot of personalization that we see a lot more in science writing for general audiences than necessarily in science writing for academic audiences. Another example of science writing for general audiences, this is an excerpt from the New York Times. Again, I have a link to this in the recommended material, in the supplemental material, I think. If not, I'll make sure I'll put it in there. And this is the beginning of an article that was published in 2018 about the zombie gene that may protect elephants from cancer. And you'll see there is contractions. And you can use contractions in formal scientific writing or writing for academic audiences as well. But when you use it, sometimes when you use it in manuscripts for academic publishers, some publishers reviewers may have a reaction to it because it can be looked at, or often contractions are looked at as a sign of more informal language. I actually really don't even write contractions in my emails. I'm a little anal about that at times, but it's not like wrong. This is perfectly grammatically correct. Some writers use contractions in their formal writing or in their writing for academic audiences. And that's okay. Again, it's more often a hallmark or a characteristic of writing for more general audiences. But you'll see shorter sentences. The first little section here is 3 sentences. This will probably be just 1 sentence in academic writing or in writing for academic audiences, right? So if you take a quick glance at this, another contraction here, and again, the scientific content is presented in a way as a story, and the focus is on the elephants, on the cell, rather than some of the methodology, some of the more complicated jargony type of description for this particular phenomenon these scientists have found, and that there is a gene that protects elephants from cancer. And I will show you the version for academic audiences right here, and this comes from an article from Cell Reports. And so you'll just taking a quick look at this, right? You see a lot of acronyms. That's another characteristic of a lot of writing for science writing for academic audiences. DNA, that's probably something you can get away with in writing for general audiences as well. But, TP53 response element evolved coincident with the evolution of large body sizes in the I can't even pronounce this, Procrucidian stem lineage. So again, lots of very discipline-specific terminology that really clearly marks this text as a text written for academic audiences or for other scientists. Although this is the study that the New York Times article that I showed you in the previous slide was summarizing. And if you take a closer look at this particular summary, it actually is written in fairly accessible language in the terms of the sentences aren't too long. There's some clear kind of rhetorical moves here that really take the reader through pretty successfully. So even somebody who's maybe not a content expert can still get something out of it. But it certainly is less, what's the term I want to use? Less narrative, right? And I use that term a lot. So it's a little bit more focused on establishing these authors as experts in their field, rather than telling a good story about it, like the New York Times article does. Although I really think that it's always a good idea, even when writing for academic audience, to think about story and narrative. But it will probably look a little different writing for cell reports than writing, let's say, a brochure for an audience that is affiliated with an NGO where people might not be scientists. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of the some of the differences between science writing for a more general audience or science writing for a more academic audience. Again, often scientific writing is used to describe science writing for a more academic audience, and then science writing tends to describe, in some cases, just the writing for general audiences, even though it can also be used as an umbrella term. So that's the big distinction here. So science writing is what we're using in this class to describe any writing about science for either GA general audiences or for AA academic audiences.